You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show talking with K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen. Roger, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Shelby.
Roger, today wanting to discuss a quick way that can kill your rural dream, and what is that?
Well, it can be zoning issues or local ordinances or some type of rule that restricts what you can do on your property. And if that conflicts with what you were hoping you'd be able to do, that can kind of wreck your dreams.
And when you say zoning, what do you mean by that?
Well, that's just a process by which local governments, now typically I'm talking for our purposes today, county or municipal zoning, that's how they regulate land use within their jurisdiction. And you have rural properties that will fall into various types of categories. And there's quite a range in Kansas, all the way in the more remote rural areas to no county zoning, to zoning restrictions and ordinances in small little communities. So it's really kind of all over the board.
And what are a few of those common zoning classifications?
Well, the common one is agriculture, and that preserves farmland and livestock production and open space. And you might run into restrictions in an area that's zoned agricultural, such as minimum lot sizes, so minimum acreage to put a single home on it, limits on non-agricultural commercial use, such as a commercial event type venue, and potential limits on livestock density. You know, one of the big issues historically in Kansas has been concentrated hog operations, not so much on the cattle side, but concentrated hog operations, and whether that violates a local rule. So that's what agriculture basically means in terms of zoning.
And what about rural residential?
Well, that's a hybrid of residential and some limited agricultural activity. And here's where you really do see some minimum lot sizes here. It's often larger lot sizes, maybe 3, 5, or 10 acres. And there'll be some restrictions on subdivisions, regulations on accessory buildings. So if you want to put up a cabin, you want to put up like a granny house, a guest house, you want to put up even a barn, you're probably going to have to go to the county and get some type of permit, or it may not even be permitted.
What about the category exclusive farm use? Does that mean no buildings?
Yeah, that strictly limits non-ag development to protect high-value farmland. And so we'll see this in certain areas that do have high values on farmland, and there's severe restrictions on residential buildings, and often only one per parcel, and virtually no commercial and no industrial use is allowed in an exclusive farm use jurisdiction.
Beforehand, you mentioned that sometimes there are really no county zoning ordinances or regulations, and does that mean it's just a free-for-all?
No, not quite. It does offer the most freedom from zoning, but you still have to check your county level building codes and health codes, maybe for a septic system or a well. And also you always want to check deed restrictions. There can be certain types of covenantal restrictions and easements on deeds, and we always want to check those too.
Roger, what do you think are some important things that producers, or really anyone that's wanting to live in rural Kansas or rural parts of the United States, should make sure they check through?
Well, I think the big one here is to research the property zoning. And the most reliable information is going to come directly from local government, not just the seller or the real estate agency. So first of all, determine if your property is inside some type of city limits, a township, or is solely under county jurisdiction. Know who you're dealing with first. And in rural areas, the county planning and zoning department is usually the correct authority. And then I think probably what you want to get is your assessor's parcel number. So the county assessor is going to have your number for your parcel, and you'll need that to search records. You can usually get that from the listing agent or the county assessor's website. In many of the counties, you can find it there. And then call or visit the county planning and zoning department, give them your parcel number and your intended use, and they can confirm the current zoning and provide official zoning ordinance and tell you if your plans are permitted or require a permit or some type of prohibition might apply. And then zoning, remember, is just one layer. As I indicated a moment ago, you also have to check the deed for restricted covenants and look up easements that might apply to a portion of the property, and that can restrict your usage too.
How could that be restricted?
Well, a prior owner may have have given an easement away to, say, an energy company, and it runs with the deed to the land, and so it's going to restrict your use of the property because it's already burdening the property. It was done by a prior owner. So you want to make sure that what your planned use is for your property is not barred by some type of deed restriction like that. And again, to reiterate, that is in addition to what government zoning rules might be in place or local ordinances. So you just have to go that extra step to determine what restrictions apply.
If the zoning isn't matching what someone is wanting to do with their property, can they easily change it?
Well, you can seek a variance. If it's from zoning or an ordinance, you can seek some type of variance from that. Now, that's a process that you have to go through. And it may cost something if you're going to have to hire an attorney to kind of help you on your case. Some of the small rural communities have some pretty restrictive rules, and we need to make sure as to whether we can have certain types of livestock within the town limits. What's permitted and what's not permitted. Sometimes we have strange definitions for livestock, and what we normally would think of as livestock may not be livestock, or the other way around. Something we think is not really livestock might be barred by some type of local ordinance that covers livestock and certain types of animals that includes what you have. So we always want to make sure that we go through the process to check that. And that is a process that can take time.
Do you often see that there's a lot of variation between counties?
Oh, there is. Yeah. So, at the counties, it's just based on what their policy is and what the geography is in their area. And even in parts of Kansas where the water issue out west can be an issue, that'll restrict certain other types of uses too that we don't see in the eastern part of the state. So the bottom line, I would come back to this, is you never want to buy a rural property banking on a successful rezoning, if you have to go through that route, or never buy a property that you don't know what the rules are. Only purchase property that is already zoned for your essential needs and what your purpose is for that property.
If someone is wanting to try the rezoning pathway, how do they go about doing that?
Well, I would suggest that they consult the local planning and zoning department to first confirm that the property's current legal status aligns with what they want to do. And if they're out of bounds with what the local rules are, you probably should get an attorney to help you through that process, because that has a lot of unique characteristics to it. And you might miss something unless you have somebody that's professionally trained and has experience in handling variances from zoning rules. So you want to avoid a regulatory nightmare when you buy a rural property. And these are things that we tend not to think about when we are purchasing that rural property. We're thinking of what our dream is, and we're not thinking of the things that could block our dream. So I always want to make sure that we check the boxes here, so to speak, and so that we're not surprised.
And Roger, with rezoning, which you have talked about in your article, which I will link in today's show notes on agtoday.net, but within there is one step of the process if someone's wanting to rezone and get a new classification that involves public comment. And so is this something where people also need to go meet with that committee?
Well, it's pretty difficult. It's a difficult process, especially in rural areas where local governments tend to prioritize preserving the area's current character. There will be some sort of comprehensive or master land use plan, and you're going to have to align in any proposed rezoning with that long-term vision of the plan. And if your change contradicts it, you're probably not going to get approved. And then, of course, because it is it's a process you have to apply for. There's going to be a formal application that you're going to have to fill out. There'll be fees that you have to pay, and you're going to have to submit your detailed plans, particularly if it's some type of business activity, non-farm business activity you want to run on your property, because then there'll be traffic concerns and so forth, and the county's going to want to be, or the locality is going to want to be aware of that. And then you're going to have to present your case to the planning commissions or zoning board, whatever the case might be, and the members of the community will have an opportunity to voice their concerns about that. And strong community resistance can sometimes be a pretty common hurdle in rural areas. So just I would say be prepared for the process.
So Roger, as we conclude today's conversation, what are those key points you'd really like people to keep in mind if they're wanting to buy some rural property?
Well, the dirt's in the details, as it often is. And I'd say before you sign a single document, you want to perform a thorough due diligence on that property's existing zoning classification, as I mentioned, and figure out what the permitted uses are and any restrictive covenants. And that's what we should do every time we buy a rural property. That's absolutely essential. Don't rely on a rezoning process, because that is risky and it's costly. So if you do your due diligence in advance, you're going to be better off.
If people do want to read more on this topic, what is the best way to do that?
I have an article that's posted to the Ag Manager website at K-State through the Department of Ag Econ, and people can find it there.
Roger, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
That was K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen. His article titled Acreage Anxiety, Zoning Issues That Can Kill Your Rural Dream will be linked in today's show notes on agtoday.net.